Story 1. My name is Edwards 22M, and this is a story about my controlling grandfather 81M, who spent years trying to force me into plastic surgery. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up. The problem with my ear. I was born with two slightly different ear shapes. One of them curls in a little, but it's not super noticeable unless you're staring at me from up close. It doesn't affect my life in any way, except that earbuds fall out more easily. Kids tease me a bit, but whatever. It was just how I looked. My grandfather, however, did not see it that way. To him, I wasn't perfect, and that was unacceptable. Looking back, I realized he had been making comments about my ear since I was in preschool, but things really escalated when I turned 14, the age you can legally get plastic surgery in my former country. The manipulation begins. Practically every day, he'd remind me of my hideous and atrocious ear. At the time, I lived with my mom, 43F, his daughter, and he lived in the apartment below us. This meant he had easy access to my life and never missed an opportunity to put me down. One day, after months of brainwashing, he took me to a fancy restaurant, just the two of us. Keep in mind, my mom and I were lower middle class, while he was more on the upper class side. I thought it was just a nice lunch, but when dessert arrived, he casually asked, "Do you want to finally get plastic surgery and look normal?" As always, I told him no, I liked how I looked. I was unique. His response: he silently stood up, paid the bill, yanked me by the arm, and dragged me to his car before I got to finish my cheesecake. He shoved me out in front of our apartment and drove off without another word. He was supposed to watch me that evening since my mom had to work late, but instead, he ignored me completely. I had no keys, so I sat outside for 6 hours until my mom came home. Luckily, it happened in April, just after my B-Day, so it was warm enough. The bribery phase. A few weeks later, he started talking to me again, acting like nothing had happened. One day, he even picked me up early from school and took me out to a restaurant, a cheaper one, but it had a carousel park nearby, which I loved. Strangely, for the first time in years, he didn't mention my ear. Not once. Instead, we just had fun. And over the next few weeks, he kept this up: movies, museums, my favorite restaurants. No insults, no guilt tripping. It felt nice. Then one day, during a car ride home, he asked, "What do you want most? I'll buy it for you." A 14-year-old being asked an open-ended question like that? I was ecstatic. I asked for a gaming PC. Without hesitation, he drove me straight to the store and told me to pick out whatever I wanted, setting a budget of 2,000 euros. To me, that was an insane amount of money. I picked out my dream setup, practically shaking with excitement. Then, at the register, he turned to me and said, "All right, pay up." I blinked. What? Oh, you don't have the money? Well, I'll give it to you, on one condition: you will fix your ear. His voice was deep and demanding, loud but not yelling, but firm. I started crying and ran out of the store. I literally ran 5 kilometers home. When I told my mom, she was livid. She stormed downstairs, pounded on his door until he opened up, and they argued for a long time. When she came back, she was in tears, but she told me I had done the right thing. The final attempt kidnapping me to a surgeon. The next day, my grandfather acted completely normal. Again, he picked me up from school, was super friendly, and told me he had a surprise for me. On one hand, I knew he was up to something. On the other, he had taught me from a young age to use people for what they could offer, so I got in the car, hoping for another fun day. Instead, he drove me to a private health clinic. Once inside, he introduced me to his friend, a plastic surgeon. They talked for a while before the surgeon took my measurements. Then, just before signing the documents, the surgeon turned to me and asked, "Which one of you wants this surgery today?" I was frozen. My grandfather immediately answered, "He does. He's just nervous." I pointed at him and held back tears. The doctor frowned. "Well, I can't perform surgery if the patient doesn't want it." My grandfather then lied and said he was my legal guardian because my parents were dead. He tried to fake documents to authorize the surgery, but thankfully, the doctor refused. At that point, I completely broke down, terrified that something had happened to my mom. My grandfather sighed, drove me home without saying a word again, and handed me off to my mom, who had no idea where I had been. That was the breaking point. We went low contact with him for a few years. Or possibly he was punishing us by ignoring us, as he tended to do. The aftermath. Eventually, when I needed braces, he offered to help pay for them. We were tight on money, so my mom reluctantly agreed. He promised to cover half of the cost. In reality, he paid for half of my top braces, a quarter of the bottom, and not to mention how he didn't think it was necessary to pay €20 every 2 weeks for a couple of years for tightening. He still every couple of months or so tried to bribe me to get the surgery, or to accept money as loan that I didn't need to pay back, or any other way he could think to get control over me. Even now, years later, he's still trying to control me. I moved to a different country after college to get away from him. I have no job yet, my savings are draining, and almost like he sensed it, he reached out last week. Do you want €10,000? All you have to do is get this quick, simple surgery, and the money is yours. I didn't even reply. The family fallout. After the incident at the clinic, my grandfather went on a smear campaign, telling our extended family that my mom, his own daughter, had turned me against my loving and caring grandfather. Most of them believed him. My mom and I were banned from family gatherings, holidays, and celebrations. He even told us we had no right to use our own last name anymore. The only person who stayed on our side was my grandmother, may she rest in peace. Final thoughts. I know this was a lot, and I am sorry for dumping it on you guys and gals, but I needed to tell someone. The last 2 therapists I saw sided with him, so I feel like I have no one unbiased to talk to. To be clear, I will never get this surgery. I will never take his money. Story 2. This happened back in the 90s when I had my second comic store. One afternoon I was in my store going through inventory when a woman walked in. This was unusual back then because, well, it was. I saw that she did have the precursor to what would become the Karen cut, wearing large rimmed glasses and a skirt that was the style back then. I figured she might be looking for a gift for her son, so I asked her if I could help. She asked me if I bought boxes of comics. I told her usually not, unless there was something I could use, but I would take a look. So we went to her car and brought in a couple of long boxes. These hold about 300 unbagged boarded books or 250 boarded, and I went through them. They were all bagged and seemed to be in good shape. They were popular books at that time. X-Men, Hulk, Ghost Rider. I thought I could sell them and offered her $100 for the lot, and she accepted. She left, and I put the boxes on a table to price them and sort them out. About 20 minutes later, a kid, about 12, walks in and looks at the books on the wall and notices the boxes. He asked if they were for sale, and I said yes, but they weren't priced out yet, so if there was something he wanted, I'd give him the price then, and he started looking through them. After a few seconds, he had a strange look on his face, and I asked him if something was wrong. I'll never forget what he said. "These are my books." I said, "What?" And he repeated it. I asked him if he could verify it, and he said that he had a code written on every board, and he could recite them. I then pulled out 5 books at random, and he nailed every code. I asked him to describe his mother, and he described the woman that sold me the books. I told him not to worry, he'll get them back. I asked for his phone number, and I called it, placed it on speaker, and waited. After a few rings, she answered, and I responded. "Mrs. Karen, your son is here and informed me that the books you sold me did not belong to you. Will you please come down and give me back the $100, and he can have his books back as I do not buy stolen merchandise?" Her response was, "My son is in your store." She screams at him to get out of there now and never to set foot in there again. She shrieks that if he ever comes in, she will have me arrested. The kid was in tears. All he muttered was, "You stole my books." She continues her rant, "I don't want that nonsense in my house. Get out now." And then she slams the phone down. I let the kid sit down while I processed what just happened. While this was going on, another kid and his mother saw him and said hello and saw he was crying. They knew him, and the new kid's mother asked what happened, and the kid told her. She was, to say the least, disgusted and said she'll take him home and have a few words with his mother. Before he left, I asked him what he wanted to do. He said whatever it takes. I asked, even call the police? He said yes. I said I'm going to try one more thing before that. About 7:30 that night, I called the number. This was before caller ID, and got the father and explained what happened that afternoon. Only thing he said was, "She did what?" I repeated, and again he said the same. Then Karen realized who he was talking to and started screaming. The father just told her to shut up. Then he thanked me and said he would handle it and asked what time I closed. About 15 minutes later, I see the kid and his father with Karen being dragged along, and she is shrieking so loud dogs 3 counties away had bleeding ears. He drags her in and tells her to give me back the $100. She yells that she doesn't want that stuff in her house, and she won't do it. She's going to have me arrested for selling these things to children, and how could they let me open in this town? She hated Superman and baseball cards. She breaks away from the father and attempts to kick out my showcase, and it was only because he managed to grab her collar and yank her back that they weren't smashed. She then tried to shove my computer off the counter, but I managed to stop her. The father gave me back what I paid plus a little extra for all the nonsense and apologized. Karen said she'll just set them on fire. Father said no, he is bringing them to his office and would keep them safe from her. He also said he would come with the kid in the future. Now I found out about the aftermath about 10 years later secondhand, so I can't verify. Karen basically destroyed the relationship and never apologized. After the kid graduated, he joined the army, married, and had a kid. He doesn't see her often, but allows contact when the father is there. Over comic books, I have seen worse. Now there are those who are probably asking, why didn't I ask her if they were hers? I didn't think of it. But since then, when a woman says she has comics to sell, I ask, are they yours? Out of all the times, at least 50 in the last 10 years, only one said they were hers. I then ask, do you have the owner's permission? Never a yes. I tell them, I don't accept stolen property. One of these was quite entertaining. At a flea market I used to go to, a woman walked to my booth and asked me if I bought comics. I asked her, are they yours? She said no. I then asked if she had permission, and again no. I asked, why do you want to sell them, and her reason was, he's too old to be reading comics. He was 37. I said, ma'am, I'm 49 at the time, and I read comics. A guy looking through my book said, ma'am, I'm 72 and I read comics. She huffed that we were immature idiots. The guy said, at least I'm not stealing my son's books. Have a nice day. This is not the worst incident I have had, but is in the top 20. Story 3. This happened over the space of a few months, a few years ago. I was a drama student at university planning my first show at a well-known theater festival. I had cast 3 fellow students in my play, and over the course of the rehearsals we all became friends. We would hang out together, and since I was the only one with a car, I would drive them places and pick stuff up for them, etc. 2 of the cast had decided that they wanted to permanently move to the city where we would be performing and spending a month, and the plan was that we would all stay at their place during that time. In the months leading up to the Mova Festival, I drove them the 4/5-hour journey between the city in which we lived and the city they were moving to multiple times to look at flats. When it came to moving, I helped them do this in my car. I had to make several journeys and never once charged them a penny. All I asked for was they buy me fish and chips on the journey. I was more than happy with this because I was helping out friends. During our rehearsals, quite close to the festival, one of my cast dropped out and I couldn't replace him. We were able to change the show to a one-woman show performed only by me, but that would have meant the others losing out. They had all worked so hard, and I didn't want them to miss out on the opportunity. So I wrote an entirely new play and submitted it so that they could still perform. At the time, I was receiving no funding or anything, so I was working 2 jobs so that I could fund all of this myself. Now, this was totally my choice and decision, and I totally would do it again. But I was struggling financially and broke brassic. Fast forward to the festival itself. I've helped my 2 friends move into their new house. I'm living on baked beans and pasta because it's all I can afford to eat and running 2 shows. Bear in mind, I've never charged my friends for anything. When they hit me with a £250 bill for staying with them, they literally split their rent and council tax for that month with me. But wait, there's more. One night they insisted on making a meal for us, which I thought was nice of them. Nothing really major, just lasagna. After dinner, the friend who'd bought the ingredients then sits down with the receipt and calculates the cost. She seriously calculated the cost of the ingredients used and charged me for it. One of the final straws happened when the brother of my so-called friend gave her some money to give to me to put towards the show. He was really grateful for the opportunity I'd given to his sister, and I was really grateful to him for recognizing my efforts. A week or 2 went by without any mention of the money from his sister that I knew she'd received. In the car on the way home after one show, the other friend confronted me about when she could expect payment from me for the meal she had cooked me. They knew I was financially struggling, and I said to her that I literally have nothing left to give her. That's when I remembered the money the other girl had. Tell you what, name of friend sat in back of car, still has the money that, name of her brother, gave towards the show. Why not take it out of that? Friend, in the back of the car, said, "Ugh, I'm not giving you that money. I don't see why my brother should be giving you any money." They are very lucky. I didn't just stop the car and chuck them out at that stage. Needless to say, I've never spoken to them again, and they lost a lot of friends over it. Story 4. I'm a 35-year-old father of 2 boys. I have post-traumatic stress disorder due to my time overseas and have the physical scars to match the mental ones. I have an incredible wife who knows me well and understands what situations I should avoid. My children are amazing, but this story revolves around my youngest son and my service dog. Jay, my youngest son, has autism, and we share a special bond because some things that set him off also put my teeth on edge. Spike, my English bulldog, is my service dog. He's well-trained, lazy, judgmental, and generally uninterested in anything he can't eat. However, he is very in tune with Jay's and my emotions and will provide a distraction when we get overwhelmed. Basically, he's like, "Oh, you're stressed? Here, scratch my back, you'll feel better, and I'll get attention." It's a win-win. The story. My family recently moved to Texas. Since we now live very close to an amusement park, we got memberships. I have to give a shout out to the park for being amazing when it comes to accommodating special needs. This particular park in Arlington, Texas, has a special program for autistic guests. They have designated rooms where individuals can relax if they become overstimulated, allowing them to calm down before heading back out to enjoy the park again. With Jay, we also don't have to wait in lines. This is a huge advantage and the reason behind this story. The park offers a pass that lets visitors skip most of the lines, but it comes at a hefty price. Even with that pass, you still end up waiting in a long line with hundreds of others who also have it. Jay, however, gets a special pass that allows us to enter through the exit with no waiting at all. A staff member signs our pass, and we go straight onto the ride. Jay has a favorite ride, the log ride. There have been days when we would ride it over and over, then stop to eat. We also have a food pass, which we pay for, and then go right back to the log ride. On this particular day, my oldest son, T, and Jay wanted to go on the log ride, so we made our way to the exit, leaving my wife and Spike in the shade because someone had to stay with him, and bulldogs and rides don't mix. As we were entering through the exit, a woman began screaming at us. I have absolutely no hearing on my right side thanks to a high-pressure wave injury, so I didn't bother turning my head to listen. Since we ride this attraction so frequently, the staff members working there recognize us by name and sight. Jay even talks to them, which is rare for him. We showed our pass, got in, and started the ride. However, the woman, let's call her Tabitha, because the name Karen is overused, made her way to the section where guests with the speedy pass wait for their turn. Instead of riding, she was more interested in yelling about how we were abusing the system by entering through the exit. Anyone who looks at Jay can immediately tell he is in a world of his own, completely absorbed in his thoughts. For all we know, he could be reading the future or talking to aliens. He's awesome like that. A staff member in a red shirt tried to calm her down. T was getting upset because, as a normal 9-year-old, he found it unsettling when adults yelled. Meanwhile, Jay was making his excited sounds, eagerly waiting for the log to stop so he could hop in. As we floated away on the ride, we could still hear Tabitha screaming. When the ride ended, we exited, assuming we would never see Tabitha again. But, as I am writing this, you can probably guess it didn't turn out that way. Tabitha reappeared like something out of a suspense novel, still shouting. This time, she escalated her remarks, saying that just because Jay has a disability doesn't mean we get extra privileges. Her yelling caused Jay to unleash what we call his super screech. Anyone familiar with autism knows that some autistic kids have incredible abilities. Jay's just happens to be an ear-piercing, high-pitched scream that can make your vision blur and feel like things in your head are shifting that shouldn't be. During this chaos, Spike was lying on the ground in a typical bulldog pose, just staring at Tabitha as if she were a wild animal, but not worth the effort to get up for. As we were being yelled at, I noticed 2 police officers approaching from behind Tabitha. I smiled. That must have been what broke her, because she suddenly lashed out and kicked Spike. That flipped my switch. At that moment, my family was literally under attack, and I was ready to react. But before I could do anything, Tabitha was already airborne, being carried, half-dragged, and handcuffed by the officers. Standing in front of me now was a well-dressed and visibly annoyed officer. He told us that they heard the screech and started heading toward us, thinking a ride had malfunctioned or something terrible had happened. I took a moment to regain my composure and checked on Spike. He was limping and whimpering. When I felt his hips, I could tell one was dislocated. Half-jokingly, I asked the officer if he could walk away for a moment and let me handle things. He, of course, had no sense of humor about the situation, but seemed to recognize that I had prior military experience. He asked if Spike was a service dog. When I confirmed that he was, the officer smiled. I wasn't in a smiling mood, but it caught me off guard. He then explained that in Texas, intentionally injuring a service dog is a felony. By this time, park security had arrived and issued a trespass order against Tabitha. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at Spike, then back at the officers. Yes, I said. Tabitha and her tiny, timid-looking husband began to panic as she was loaded onto a golf cart. Meanwhile, we got on a separate cart and headed straight to the vet. The vet treated Spike, and thankfully, he was okay. We went back to the park the next day with Spike in a stroller. No one batted an eye. In fact, everyone loved seeing a bulldog in a stroller. I let people pet him, and he was a hit, just enjoying the attention in his usual lazy, indifferent way. I have since been contacted by the investigating officer and have given my statements. I may have to testify, but honestly, I'm looking forward to sitting on the witness stand with Spike on my lap. Story 5. Recently, my best friend showed me some videos he found of people reading my posts on YouTube for content. They just ranted, exaggerated half of everything I said, and completely skipped over numerous details. They even complained that I put in too much detail. To be honest, I laughed pretty hard seeing them go on like that. I'm not going to say they were wrong about me being overly detailed, because they weren't. I wouldn't say I'm much of a talker in person, but when I'm behind a keyboard, all bets are off. One of the few things that actually annoyed me was when they tried to call nonsense on the dugout fort I made in the woods when I was 11. They kept insisting I was 8. Come on, guys, if you're going to rant about something or someone you only know through a Reddit account, at least get the details right. Also, that fort was literally just a hole dug in soft forest dirt. It's not like I needed a jackhammer to dig it out. I worked on it for weeks. Any determined kid in reasonably good shape with even the most basic tools could have built that fort. But if they hated how descriptive I was and how often I mentioned my bike or the genders of people I knew or know, then why were they even reading it on air? The only reason I can think of is that they wanted views and an excuse to complain about a guy they've never met. They even uploaded another video about my post regarding my old college roommates. They acted like I was being unreasonable over the spaghetti dinner I made for my roommates after we made a deal that they'd each chip in $5, and then they backed out of paying me. I was completely broke at the time. After paying my bills and food costs, I was lucky if I had even $50 left to my name at the end of the month. I had to take odd jobs to get extra cash when I needed it. Do any of them know what it's like to struggle like that financially? Something tells me no. So I'd say it was more than fair that I not only got upset about the $15 they owed me, but also pressured them into paying me $60 each when they threw out all my food and stole my gaming systems. Anyway, since I'm here, I may as well share the latest thing that happened with my ex-wife. A couple of months ago, I closed on a one-bedroom condo that I got for an excellent price. The people selling it were an elderly couple moving to Arizona, and their son happens to be a coworker of mine. The condo is fairly outdated, but it's in good shape, and it has a surprisingly large closet where I can store my bike. It's a little farther from my job than the apartment I was renting before, and I had to buy my way out of my previous lease. But the condo was too good of a deal to pass up, and it's in a safer area. I've even taken to riding my bike to work sometimes, even though I'm a little afraid of getting hit by a car. The extra riding has helped me get into better shape. I also had to replace my bike's crank axle caged bearings because the original ones didn't hold up. But otherwise, it still looks more or less the same as when I posted a picture of it a while back. As for my condo, I expected my narcissistic, estranged mother to reach out about it because she always wants something from me whenever I make progress in life. But instead, it was my ex who contacted me. I guess she had been stalking my social media or something. Not exactly surprising. I had been living in the condo for about 3 weeks when I got an evening phone call. I was playing video games and answered my phone out of habit. As soon as I realized it was her, I turned on the recording app on my phone and told her I was recording. She didn't care at all and sounded very drunk. I had dealt with her bad drinking habits many times before. The more intoxicated she got, the more childish she became. She once got so drunk that she ended up in an argument at a bar with some random woman over who had a better figure. When I got her home, she kept trying to walk into the neighbor's house, and I had to physically drag her inside. She then vomited all over me, so I had to clean myself and her up before making her go to bed. I also had to stay up for another hour to make sure she didn't try to get up and wander off again, which had happened multiple times before. She once woke up half-dressed on the kitchen floor. Another time, she woke up in the backyard when it started raining. And I won't go into detail about the worst incident, but let's just say I found her passed out in her car with certain objects in certain places. I had to bring out a blanket to cover her up, and thankfully, no neighbors saw. But all of that was mild compared to the other things she put me through while we were married. Back to the phone call, I pointed out that she and I really had no reason to be talking and asked what she wanted. She went on a drunken rant about me buying the condo. She kept going on about how her life was miserable. She was in debt and had to pay it off alone. She got written up at work. She had to sell her luxury car to save money, and now had to drive some old, used car. She didn't elaborate on the make, year, or model, but she has always been obsessed with luxury cars. She also complained about losing friends, getting dumped by the guy she had been dating, and hating her apartment because it was tiny and her neighbors were awful. And yet, here I was with a great condo that she would do anything to be living in. I told her none of that had anything to do with me. That's when she insulted me and accused me of abandoning her after she claimed I caused her mother to have a heart attack. I reminded her that, during the divorce, she admitted to why she really married me. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage where I was constantly being used for my wallet. Then, I pointed out that her entitled attitude was the reason she couldn't keep a man or a friend in her life. That's when she lost it on me, and I could barely understand anything she was saying. I hung up on her, and she started sending me an onslaught of text messages. I just shut my phone off for the night and let her fume. The next morning, I turned my phone back on and was greeted with a flood of messages. I texted her back, telling her that if she didn't leave me alone, I'd look into filing for a restraining order. She just responded with a middle finger emoji. That evening, she called me again drunk again. I bluntly told her I was recording the conversation and that I did not want to talk to her. She told me to shut up and that she was going to get her rant in. I hung up before she could finish her sentence. She immediately called back. I answered, let her go on for about 10 seconds, then hung up again, so she switched back to texting. She admitted she was extremely jealous that I bought the condo and that her life shouldn't be this bad, while mine was going better than ever. I pointed out that she was the only one ruining her own life. She destroyed our marriage, and she knew it. I wasn't surprised that she kept losing people she was toxic. She texted back that she wasn't toxic, just misunderstood. I replied with several laughing emojis and then let her have it. I reminded her about how she tricked me into marrying her, how she used me, lied to me, and was financially controlling. I pointed out how she constantly put me down, let her mother do the same, and didn't even care when her mother stole my key collection, something she knew was my pride and joy. She never loved me, she just wanted financial security. If that's not toxic, I don't know what is. There was no point in trying to save a marriage as doomed as ours, especially since she blamed me for her mother's passing. I wasn't responsible for that. Her mother's addiction to unhealthy food, the hoarder house filled with decades-old garbage, the rodent infestation, and the black mold, that's what did her in. The only thing I did was report the house because it was a danger to her and everyone around her. My ex texted back with a crying emoji, followed by an angry emoji, then a middle finger emoji paired with a poop emoji. I sarcastically replied, real mature, along with an eye roll emoji. I can only imagine how much she was losing it on her end because she sent me a garbled mess of letters, followed by calling me a terrible person and accusing me of thinking I was better than her. I told her I didn't care whether I was better than her or not, it wasn't exactly a high bar to clear. She responded with a string of expletives in all caps, loaded with exclamation points. I pointed out that she was just projecting her anger onto me because she knew she messed up. Then, just to be petty, I told her that if she hated her car so much, maybe she should get an electric bike like her mother did. Right after I sent that, my phone started ringing again. I declined the call. She tried again. I declined it again. I sent her one final text. I'm blocking your number. If you try to bother me again, I'll seek legal counsel. Her last reply before I blocked her was a message saying she hoped I fell off my bike and got seriously hurt. It's been a while now, and she hasn't tried to contact me again through any other means. No surprise there. She would rather blame me for her misery than admit that she's the reason her life is a mess. I'm not claiming to be perfect. Anyone who's read my posts knows that. But I played the role of the quiet, submissive husband for far too long, and I have absolutely no desire to ever speak to her again.